Let's jump back into our series of Purpose-Driven Life as we talk about how do we live our lives on purpose? How do we even figure out what our lives are to be about? And to do that, I want to look at a verse that probably is one of the most quoted verses in all of the Bible. And the verse is this. It's Romans 8:28. It says, we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God. And this is where we usually stop with this verse, and we kind of look at it and say, okay, we know that God causes everything to work together for good, everything, the good, the bad. And there's a lot of bad that happens in life, a lot of tragedy that happens around us. We know that God can take the good, the bad, and he can work that together, turn it into something good, even the tragedy that happens. And it doesn't take you but just a couple of minutes to watch the news, and you go, oh man, there's so much tragedy. There's so much bad in the world. But God says, okay, I can take that, and I can work it together, turn it into something good. This is where we usually stop when we're kind of looking or quoting this verse, but there's another part to the verse. It's not yet finished. So let me just kind of show you how the verse finishes. We know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose for them. Well, what if you were to get a call from God? And I would just say, if God calls, I tell you, pick up the phone. If God calls, don't let it just ring and ring. Don't let it go to voicemail. That's a call you want to receive. And what God actually tells each of us is that he's already called us. God has already called you. He's already called me. And when we talk about God calling us, bottom line, what we're saying, this word call is actually used about 100 times, over 100 times in the New Testament. And it's the idea of God has given you an assignment. God has given you, or he's given me, a mission, a purpose in life. God has called, or God has given you an assignment in life of what he wants you to accomplish. The very reason that he accomplished, that he created you, the very reason that God created me. And so understand, God says, look, I've called you. Now, I want to talk about this idea of calling to help you understand, okay, when God says he's called you, and God has called each and every one of us. He said each and every one of us have a purpose. Each and every one of us have an assignment. Each and every one of us have a mission with our lives. And so I want to give you some things that calls are or they're not. And then next week we're going to get into some real specifics and say, okay, what might be the specific calling for your life? But today I just want to talk about this idea of calls or calling, and God calling you, giving you an assignment. And one of the things you need to understand is that your calling in life is not your career. It's actually a man whose name is Paul. Paul he penned much of what we read in the Bible today. But Paul is a guy that he had a calling on his life. God's call for him was to do a lot of the writing, putting down on paper God's thoughts, God's words. But Paul, if you knew his life, you would go, oh, there's no way he's going to accomplish his calling in his life. Paul, if you knew him in his day, we would have considered him to be a terrorist. Because what Paul would actually do is he'd go into people's homes, he'd drag them out in the street, he would beat them, he'd throw them in jail. Sometimes he would put them to death. He was a murderer. And here's Paul, and God had a call on his life, and all of those actions didn't change God's call on his life. It doesn't matter how messed up your life has been, whether you've messed it up or whether somebody else has messed your life up for you, no matter how difficult things have been, no matter how many dumb decisions you may have made with your life, it hasn't changed God's calling on your life. The calling that God gave you before you were born, God says it's there and it's going to be there forever, no matter what has happened so far in your life. Another thing you need to know about your calling in life is you can't fulfill it by yourself. The calling that God, the assignment that God has given you in life, you're not going to be able to accomplish it just by yourself. God's designed us to be connected with other people. He describes us as being like a body, a physical body. And so he describes and he says, you know what? A hand as a part of the body is incredibly useful, but if you separate it, a hand by itself has no value whatsoever. Or an eye as a part of the body is incredibly valuable, but by itself it has no value. A nose, whatever it may be, by itself has no value, but as a part of the body, it's incredibly valuable. And God says, look, the calling that I have for you, the assignment that I have for you, it's meant to be experienced as a part of a body. You can't do it. You can't do it by yourself. So my prayer for you this week, as you lean in closer to Jesus, that God will flood you with light, And you'll begin to see yourself as he sees you. Not what somebody else may have said about you, not what somebody else may have told you, but what he sees in you, that you're his masterpiece. And as you begin to see yourself as his masterpiece and you begin to understand he's got a purpose for you, you're not just here by accident. You're not just taking space, but instead there's an assignment for you to accomplish. And as he begins to flood your life with light and you understand who you are, you're a masterpiece of God designed to do good things, to make a contribution in this world. May you begin to have the confidence that comes with understanding that there's a reason for you to live. May you begin to feel the energy that comes from understanding that there's a purpose to your life.